South Padre Island, I hope to have an interview with Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers. The date is, what is today? November the 25th or 26th? 26th.
I think we have started long ago.
That's true. Well, I'll say something. I nabbed Mr. Rogers out in the hall and gave him a copy of a proposal that the Presbyterian Church U.S. is working on. We have a task force now, and we're studying the impact of theology on television and vice versa, or the impact of television in the church. And we wanted to get Mr. Rogers' insights into this, seeing as how he's in a perfect position. One of the fascinating questions we've come up with is that most people are working on impacting television through the church. That's something we're all pretty much involved in. But what is television doing to the church and the church's message? How is it changing how we teach religion? How is it changing how we are as Americans and as people in the world? And how is television making us something different, a community of 200 million people wired together, having the same experience? And so we're trying to figure out some of the theological implications of television.
What do you think are some of the... I'm just curious to know what you think are some of the models of religious people that are portrayed through television. I remember just hating that minister on the Waltons.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Remember him
Yeah.
before he went away? I
Very
liked his wife a
cloying.
lot.
Yeah. He was a...
But I was so glad when he moved away. And they got a better one. But he just seemed so
pious.
Pious, and he just didn't really care to listen or understand.
Do you find the Protestant clergy generally are presented more as, pious is certainly one of the words. Like the Roman Catholics, it always seemed to me, had a better lobby going somehow, and their priests look real.
I just wonder why. And of course, I think that probably the people who come off best through television are Jewish people.
Their humor certainly shows through better.
What's a good example of a Jewish person on television who seemed real?
Well, what I mean is the message of Judaism. And maybe it's because they seem to care so. For instance, when we did that Christmas special last year that's going to be repeated this year on PBS, at least 50% of the response that came to us was from people of the Jewish faith. Now, for a Christmas special, and I'm going to show tomorrow just a tiny part of that in which I talked about a friend of mine who celebrates Hanukkah and a friend who doesn't celebrate anything at all at Christmas time. That seemed to be the thing that touched the people the most. And people wrote to me and said, imagine you're talking about Hanukkah on a Christmas special. Well, that warms your heart. And you would think twice before you didn't do it the next time you made a Christmas special. Now, I think it has something to do with response. And Jewish people seem to send in positive responses to anybody who even tips his hat at them. And of course, most of the heads of the networks are Jewish. I don't know what that says about programming, but I don't see that it isn't something that must influence it somehow, at some level.
Does it suggest that great middle America, Protestant America, is just too complacent, doesn't write in, doesn't respond, doesn't give any feedback? Is that why we simply get what comes rather than what we'd like?
I really think that it's you talk about lobby, I think that the most powerful lobby in all of the country are the people who watch and write.
What kinds of responses do you receive, Fred? Particularly through with children. What kinds of things have come back to you in terms of some of the things that they may write in, or responses that you've been able to see from the things that they particularly like or are responsive to in what you're doing?
Well, so much of our work, Bud, has been for children who don't write yet, that a great deal of the response comes from their parents. But of course, we receive drawings from children, and of course, I'm fascinated with what those drawings might mean to the kids. But many families write to say how they use the neighborhood in their own lives. And many parents will say, you know, I never would have thought to talk about going down a bathtub drain with my child. But that you would bring that up says to me that it might be something important in his or her life. And so I think that parents have often looked over the shoulders of their children as they've watched the neighborhood, and have, in so doing, seen the kinds of things that we felt were important to communicate. For instance, when we dealt with fire, Corny's factory burned down in the neighborhood of Make-Believe. Well, I knew that children's concerns about fire were largely linked to their concerns about control of fluids, body fluids. For instance, many children's dreams about fire have a urinary theme as their basis. And so I did a whole week of control of fluid, damming up water and all sorts of things, the whole week before we ever approached the control of fire. Nevertheless, there were some kids who were very, very frightened of the program in which we dealt with fire. No one was hurt. The fire was put out very quickly. Nevertheless, we had responses from parents about that. And I remember one man calling from Boston to say, my child doesn't want to see your program anymore. She is so frightened by Corny's factory burning down. And so as gently as I could, I tried to ask him about her history as far as toilet training was concerned, and if she ever had any urinary difficulties, and what was... Well, it turned out she had chronic urinary difficulties, and when she went to the doctor, the examinations were so painful, they were burny, and those were her words. The examinations were just like she was burning up. And every person who complained about that program of fire for their child, it turned out that there was something that child was bringing to that program that made that fear come forth. And so I'm constantly impressed with the drama that we take to the television set.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it's really important.
Wouldn't you be inclined automatically to hear, though, from sort of the best kind of parents there are? Those are the ones who would watch television with their children, or at least discuss it with them. Have you any idea what kind of impact the program has on that vast number of other children whose parents just plunk them in front of the television set so that it will babysit them?
Well, only from schools and from people who've done incidental research throughout the country. And there's a growing body of that, which is fascinating. In the summary of the report to the Surgeon General on television and violence, our program was mentioned by the researchers Stein and Friedrich as being the one which had the most what they called pro-social aspect to it. I don't know whether have you seen that
I've heard
that
of it,
research?
but I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
It's an American document.
Well, that interested me.
Have you had any indication of the impact of your program on the parents or adults who watch your program? I'm thinking of one I saw that I remember, I will always remember, was the one you talked about. There was another whole week on somebody in the neighborhood of make-believe wished somebody else was dead. And it was the whole thing about wishing doesn't make it so. That impressed me, from something that happened like 20 years ago. And I'll always remember that. And I just happened to be watching it one day. Do you get responses from adults to your program?
Oh, yes. Yes, and they're fascinating things, too, because different adults identify with different characters. There are a lot of people who love Lady Elaine Fairchild, because she just says exactly how she feels it. And you can go in college dormitories and see great big signs on some of the kids' doors. Go to it, Fairchild. But of course we now have some parents in Pittsburgh who used to be kids who watched the Children's Corner years ago. When Josie Carey and I did that we began in 54. And so it's fun to know about the second generation of kids who are coming along, because if parents have had themselves felt good about being part of the characters of King Friday and Lady Elaine and Daniel Tiger and all the rest, why then I wonder what that means when their kids see those same characters. But that's not answering the question that you asked, and I want to get back to that. I thought it was very theological what you said, that wishes don't make things come true. Now, how do you deal with that in relationship to prayer? And how do you deal with, and I'm going to show a part of the neighborhood tomorrow in which Chef Brockett dresses up as Santa Claus, and Santa Claus comes to the neighborhood of make-believe, because I wanted to work on omnipotence and children's concerns about omnipotence and the line between the separation of self and other, which is such an important developmental task in childhood. And for anyone, to be able to know all and see all and hear all is, to me, very anti-developmental as far as kids are concerned. So, how do you deal with that in a healthy relationship with a child and yet be able to help that child with the omnipotence of God? I think it's a dilemma. And I wonder if the only way that you can deal with it is to postpone it, to postpone the theology until the development of the kid, the ego of the kid, is far enough along to be able to understand it. Now, I don't know. I find it a dilemma. Because
have we a tendency sometimes as adults to project our theological dilemmas onto the children?
Well, I don't see how we can't. But don't you think there is so much of what I call unresolved childhood fantasy?
Oh, the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, that is just projected right onto the screen. There are so many people who in their own childhoods were so concerned about so many things. And so what they're doing now in positions of writing and producing and performing are just dipping back into that childhood that they don't understand at all and make something out of it. And particularly the oral aggression that comes forth in so much of all of this biting, all of this incorporation by mouth of a lot of children's programming. And it's not reserved for the commercial networks either. But there are a great many people who are exceedingly orally oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't understand that and really don't have some kind of controls about that in their own lives, if they get into positions of producing programs for kids, they're just going to have everything eaten up. Now, I wonder why the kids are so self-destructive and other-destructive. And I think that this just feeds right into that, because I think kids really are these days. I mean, pot is really self-destructive. All of the kinds of crap that kids are putting into themselves by mouth and every other way. And it really is destructive. It destroys their brains. We've heard all of this garbage about how it really doesn't affect you. Well, there is a lot of research now that says that it does. But it's so widespread that, and I don't understand why people have to destroy themselves, and consequently others. But the television does it all the time.
Is it predisposing them towards those kind of self-destructive acts?
Who knows? But what I'm saying is that I don't feel that it can, that it does the opposite. I mean, there are these people who say that it doesn't affect kids at all, that violence on television doesn't affect kids at all. Well, I'm not about to believe it. But Jerome Kagan and all of these people at Harvard, excuse me, I don't know whether any of you are from Harvard, but I lean much closer to the people at Yale who really care about what's going on inside. The Harvard people are generally so anti-dynamic, developmentally oriented people. And don't put this on the radio or anything, okay? But the people, I'm so impressed with the people at Yale, and these seem to be quite different schools, and I would love them to get into some really hard, serious debate someday, and I think maybe they will. Well, Kagan is the one that I know the best, and he works all the time for CTW, and we won't get into that. But I just think that if the people who are the purveyors of television could just please understand what their own hidden agendas are before they superimpose it on all the kids of the world, this would be all I would ask. Please know thyself.
That is really interesting to me to hear you say this, because I heard David Rintel speak at Harvard 2 years ago, and it became very apparent to me in working in about television programming, studying it, that writers are writing their own realities, which are very different from my realities in Hollywood and in New York, and it's coming out so fast they can't think it through or experience even. But I'd never thought about it being their own unresolved childhood fantasies. That's a very interesting thing for me to put through.
Work on it, because I think it might be something that putting it through all that you know, which is so specialized and so important, I think it might come out as helpful.
Well, if people are putting across their unresolved childhood fantasies, and that becomes television, and that becomes a reality of sorts, because it is television to people, then they take it in and it becomes a cycle. What does that do to the rest of their lives and understandings, meaning like their theology? See what I mean? If what comes across as television is reality, because it's there, what does that have to do with other kinds of reality? How does that impact other realities? Not, non-on television realities.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you see the world through that tube, 6-7 hours a day on the average, what does that do to what you think about other things? Do you think in TV terms, say? And what are TV terms?
I'm sure you know a lot better than I.
No, I believe I don't know it all.
I just want, there have been some studies done that say that after a certain age, people don't believe anything that's on television. And I think that advertisers have been concerned about that. Well, do you think that's so?
I know,
That's hard to believe.
especially if you grew up with it. That's an added factor.
I think it's true in individual cases, but not as a general rule.
Television viewing is going down. I think that much is true. And I look at my 17-year-old daughter, and I think they listen to a lot more radio now than I did when I was that age. Television was new and wow, big thing we got to look at. So I think there's some truth to that fact. But by that time, the damage may be done in terms of your analysis of the vicious cycle of what is portrayed reinforces what is there. It just
Yeah.
institutionalizes it.
Well, while I see all the damages too, I'm not willing to write television off as a big nasty either. And I grew up with it 27 years worth, and I'm not, and I like it. That's right, I like it. I watch television. But I know it's part of my life, you know. It's there. I remember before there was television, very vaguely, but it's just always there, you know.
Simple
Television's
video.
there. It's there.
One thing that I think of when we talk like this is that I'm a television awareness trainer, and what I get from people all the time is even at 5th grade levels, I know what's real from what's unreal. They are adamant about this. Well, my feeling is that a lot of us don't know what's real from unreal, particularly on television, which is something you're saying, Cheryl. And this gets into something that's another area entirely, but the news. It's really tough to tell what's real and what's not real.
I worry about kids watching the news. Do you?
Oh, yes.
Very much.
Because
That's where it's the most difficult to
yeah.
separate fact from fiction. Excuse me, what were you going to say?
Well, what concerns me is that it's. I guess they just don't have the time to say what I think is so important. But there's so many disasters on the news, and they rarely have the time, or they rarely take the time to show that there are people in the world who care for others. You know, if they just show the nurse or the doctor or somebody taking care. Usually what happens is that they come along and shove somebody into some ambulance and off they go.
It
Or
won't
they.
sell newspapers.
Pardon me?
It won't sell newspapers.
Yes.
It's their ends.
Uh-huh. But I think that the kids must sense that it's a very frightening world. I'm talking about young children who
What-
see a lot.
What's
of
the bottom range for the neighborhood as far as attracting viewers? What do you gear it to? Age.
I think of it as centrally for 5-year-olds, but I don't dare say so because there are so many kids who
Need it. We're older.
who want to see it, who are older. And there are elements for older kids, sure, but so many of the themes that we have worked with the hardest have been the preschool themes of the concern about separation and body integrity and all of these things that I consider as being in the Oedipal phase of development in childhood.
That would be below 5, also.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, what's your cutoff?
The lowest? Oh, my. I just hate to tell you that there are some kids who are watching that their mothers are giving them bottles in their arms.
Mine was one.
As soon as they can concentrate and not
Mhm.
fix on the television screen.
But it
I
runs
would
in
think.
conflict with some of the preschool nursery in particular, where, for instance, at a Halloween party, they won't allow the 4-year-olds to wear a mask of any kind because they say they're not old enough yet to distinguish between, real and not real.
Well, maybe some of them aren't. But it worries me when people make pronouncements about age-appropriate things in very specific, a 3.5 will be able to do this, and a 4 will be able to Well, that's just not so. I mean, there are a lot of people who take Gazelle and these books and just make new orthodoxies out of them. And I think it's very unhealthy because we really all are quite different. Oh, there's a flow as far as what can be expected at certain ages. But, well, you know, I love to think of Einstein. He just failed arithmetic, just miserably, and they said he'd never be able to do anything in the field of mathematics when he was in the early grades of school. Well, yeah.
Could you say some more about the concept you had about the eating and how people who have not resolved that in childhood are expressing that now in the media? Could you speak more about how that manifests itself?
Have you ever seen any of the cartoons that are used in programs in which well, they end up by the characters eating whatever is the central theme? I mean, if there happens to be a building that's being built, for instance, and people are doing this building and they're making some sort of a deal out of the building, the cartoon ends by everybody eating that building, so it's back to where it started. And just keep your eyes open for what I call oral aggressivity. And I think you'll find a lot of it. But you'll also be able to trace it back to the people who've created it. You know, it's we who do things with the technologies. These technologies can be used for wonderful, wonderful things, just like atomic fission.
In that connection, do you see your television work as an extension of your ministry in the full sense of that word?
Oh, sure.
Does your church denomination see it that way?
I think that they tried to.
You're still reverend, right? They hadn't taken it away from you.
No.
Okay, they probably.
It'd be the other way around, though, wouldn't it? You don't see neighborhood as an extension of your ministry. It's the other things that you do that are extension of your ministry of the neighborhood.
Well, in a way, yeah.
I would think so.
Because I was ordained, you know, to work with families through the mass media.
Specifically?
Yes. And they told me at the presbytery not too long ago that they didn't think that that ordination would go through these days.
No, it certainly wouldn't in the Southern Presbyterian.
And I think that's too bad.
I do too.
That's kind of retrenching, you know? What about you, Vince? How are you going to ask for ordination? Do you know? What's that work in the Methodist Church?
Right now, through the West Penn Conference, they don't think that what I'm going to be doing will fall under ordination. They've kind of limited it to word and sacrament.
That's the way
So
we
that's what-
have.
yeah.
My church has done the same thing, so I'm in the same dilemma.
Although they're not too sure either, because the bishop says, yeah, I would go through the ordination process, but the board and all the other people say, no, you probably wouldn't go through. So right now, they're working on a diaconal thing. It's kind of in a state of flux right now.
After 5 years as chairman of our church's National Task Force on Ministry, we have hashed through all that stuff. And it's still very much in debate within our church. But mine is considered to be a ministry, a broadcasting ministry. But I wasn't ordained to that. I was ordained to the ministry, and then inducted to this particular piece of work, which was seen by the church as a viable piece of work.
I think they're working on it. I mean, they're just kind of in the middle right now.
Well, don't you think we're going to have more and more tent ministries?
Yes.
I mean, there are going to be little congregations that aren't going to be able to afford a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel is the direction of, in particular in your area of children's broadcasting? What do you see in terms of what you're doing? What's down the road as you look at what you're doing?
What are you up to?
Well, it got to be too much for me to do a daily program. I was doing 65 a year, and I just couldn't do anything else. And so that's when I said, can we please have a hiatus from this? So that I wanted to try something for adults, because we'd heard from so many adults that they looked at the neighborhood long after their kids had grown up. And so we developed old friends, new friends. But I would have never been able to do that. And I would have never been able to come to gatherings like this, because it takes an enormous amount of time to make 65 half hours a year, the way we were doing the neighborhood anyway. Well, Vince, how many have you made of Vince's place?
7.
7. Well, you know how much time that, in a year. And you know how much time that takes. Of course, you've been going to seminary as well. But we're making specials, and it's fun to make specials because you know when they're going to be shown. If you do a kind of library like we did with the neighborhood, you don't know when a certain program will pop up. Now, with the Christmas special, you know that they'll plug it in at Christmas time. And we're just now in the process of making a springtime special, which will be on sometime in April. Johnny hasn't gotten his hand in it yet, but he'll be doing the music probably in February. But
What will be its theme? Rebirth, new life, and so on?
Yes, you'll find that in it. There'll be people who will think that it's just, the theme is simply the repairing of Betty's Little Theater's leaky roof. But again, it's because you bring certain things to that program that maybe somebody else might not. That's what fascinates me about it.
But what was the ethos to motivate a spring special as against a special?
It was rebirth. It was cooperation. It was community. Everybody in the community gets together to make a market and a musical, all to raise money for Betty's Little Theater's roof. Betty feels very bad about it at first. And I say to her, well, why? I mean, we're doing this to fix your roof. She says, well, that's just it. And I can't understand it. And she said, well, it's called Betty's Little Theater, I say. She said, yeah, that's what no, it's Betty who says that. And I say, yeah, but you let us participate in your plays, and it's really a community theater. Why would you want to do it all yourself? She comes around. But we all have those feelings.
Coca-Cola's been doing it for a while, too.
Yeah. We all wonder if there aren't times when we... And then at the end, I say there are things that we like to do by ourselves, and that's true, and that's healthy. But there are some things that we can't. We could have never made that musical or that market all by ourselves.
Fred, when do you want to go to bed?
When do I need to, Daddy?
It's 11:43 body time, Pittsburgh time. It's 10:40. Want to do about another 5-10 minutes, then go?
Is it 10-something now?
Texas time.
Texas time.
Okay, I have to swim about 7, I guess. We have a very long day tomorrow. We have to get clear up to Sherman, Texas by tomorrow night. And then the next day, we have an 18-hour day the next day. It was scheduled too closely, because I sure would love to have spent more time here.